Greetings, this is Mask, and today we will be reviewing a much-anticipated mod. This is the RUBICON'S Inferno mod. The mod where I had to basically re-record my entire video because it just got an update while I was developing it. But luckily then this update is really good, so hey, let's get right into it. Of course, I will be reminding first that we always start with the following section. The good. Honestly, I am quite impressed with just how quickly you really get the feel of this mod. Even just booting up the game, it isn't just the menu that's changed, and by the way, I just gotta give a compliment to the menu because it's a lot more impressive than, like, for instance, the armory thing where it's just plastered in Photoshop. The words, I mean. But they even went through the process of modifying the dang garage, and it just has an entirely different vibe to it. I love the feeling, and, you know, for a good challenge mod, it has good presentation, and that's just the first compliment I have to give. It's how the mod feels. But I'm not going to drone on about presentation, because this really isn't like reviewing the cover art for a game. Let's get into the difficulty. This mod gave me the first ever in so long feeling of getting my tail whipped. Like, goodness gracious, it kicked me in the rear. It actively beat me at times. And that was, I gotta say, it's amazing. One can see why the mod itself says that it's intended for full OS tuning, because it's pretty insane at times. It's insane. It's very difficult. It's exactly what it's advertising. So, like, take it seriously, or else it will take you a lot more seriously and stomp you into the ground. I love that, by the way. I love the fact that it will actually, like, look at this. Look at this. If you underestimate that line of MTs, they will slap you with that and you will lose a ton of your health. That's just awesome. So yeah, the difficulty, it's exactly what it markets itself as, an ultra hard mode mod. So I love that. I love it. One particular thing I love when it comes to the difficulty is the use of artillery in different levels. Just take a look at this one here. As you can see, then the artillery is very specifically placed so that rather than just blindly rushing into a level, then you kind of have to think before you do it, right? You think, you equip your weapons accordingly, and then you take it on. It's really cool and really fun, if I'm being honest. Another thing that, while weird, I can't help but admit I kind of like is the fact that some ACs have been reduced to normal enemies throughout the levels. You'll fight generic Baus ACs, or generic Balaam ACs, or just some other things like that. And I think that's really cool, because it adds some depth, and also, let's be honest, AC fights are generally some of the easiest in the game. Looking at you, Walter. But anyway, yeah, I really like the use of ACs in here, because they're not common. They're still, like, semi-rare, but sometimes then you'll just be jumped by an AC, and it's fun to just take them out in that way. So that's really cool. Generic AC enemies, I give that a thumbs up. But still, it is up to your personal taste whether you think that is a good or bad decision. Back on the topic of ACs, though, I think something I regret not mentioning in my last review was the arena. And this one quite delivers on it, too. There are plenty of unique and quite fun, honestly, builds here, and not to toot my own horn because I submitted some of the builds that appear in here, but I like them quite a lot. Still, I'm not really sure how to feel on the fact that it replaces the arena rather than adding to it. Though, if this is simply a limitation on the modder's experience, then I understand. The level layouts as well are quite impressive in my opinion. Generally speaking, then, I think that the enemy placement is very fun, like, for instance, this line of MTs, this clever placement of enemies right here, the artillery over here. This thing over at the Galia Dam is just cute, in my opinion. There are a lot of examples that I'm showing on screen right here of just different sometimes they aren't even hard, they're just clever. And that's one of the things that I like about the mod. It's very clever enemy replacement. Except when it isn't, and then it just shoves like 5 billion MTs in your face, but that's a topic for later. Still, one particular thing I like about the level layouts is plot layouts. And by that I mean some of the entire plot lines of levels are changed. My favorite example being the Defend the Old Spaceport, where you actually do the job as in the briefing, and Raven just pops into the battle with you as a wild card. That was genuinely one of the best experiences ever. But yeah, there's no shortage of dialogue changes in this mod, and it's just so fun. And honestly, it's not something I see in other mods, so props to the author for just doing that. I think that one particular thing that's undeniable about this mod is it's easily the most ambitious I've seen. Sure, there are a lot that add a bunch of parts and stuff, but there's none that quite are like, yes, I'll completely alter the trajectory of a mission just because I feel like it. I gotta credit the author's boldness on that one. Speaking of boldness though, I think this is pretty much the only mod I've ever seen that just straight up overhauls bosses. Like, this is amazing. There are plenty of examples I could show here, but I don't know if I want to show all of them and just spoil the audience, but there's a reason why this Enforcer is the poster child of the mod. The bosses are overhauled in, frankly, quite creative and fun ways. I mean, there are a couple issues with them that I'll bring up later, but yeah, very fun bosses, very cool bosses. I love them, you love them, we all love them. And they feed you that sensation I was talking about of getting your tail kicked, getting stuck on a boss again. It's awesome. So yeah, I would absolutely recommend this mod for the bosses. And hey, best of all, it doesn't give us like super overpowered gear or anything to beat up the bosses. No, it is an ultra hard difficulty mod. Exactly what it markets itself as. Very awesome. But I really have to stop talking about the good things about this mod because there are no shortage of issues with it. Which thus inevitably brings us to... So first off, props for overhauling the training missions, but that's what I'm going to criticize first. The training missions are kinda awful. They aren't awful really, it's more the fact that they are... Sometimes then the difficulty is not because of actual difficulty and more because the loadout they gave you is just so genuinely trash. Yeah, like the first level of training isn't that bad, but there are some particular ones. This one especially is a really bad loadout. This loadout here also isn't the best. It feels sort of like artificial difficulty, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, of just giving one just horrible loadouts for the combat scenarios you're put in. But yeah, I wish we could have slightly more optimal builds. The boss challenges, while I appreciate them, there are a couple issues, specifically not being able to complete them, because there are a lot of streamers I could name right now who are playing the mod right now, who I know, in New Game Plus, will not be able to get any of the OS chips. Like, it's fine for a complete save, and I know that's what it's intended to be played with, but any fresh save player is not going to be getting those OS tuning, and they won't even be able to do any of the other boss challenges. So yeah, I don't like that, so yeah, that could use some work. There are some symptoms of boss overtuning where they just deal a little bit too much damage. I particularly think that a few attacks on here, I think it's just a little too hard to dodge that attack. Overall, I don't think it's like too atrocious. I think there is a serious problem with ammo, specifically in the early game, where you'll just run out of ammo during some missions. It's very annoying, and it's especially atrocious in the first level, where you're just literally unable to kill all the enemies in the level because Loader 4 is not capable of taking out the enemies. So yeah, I didn't like that much. It feels like a sort of limiter on difficulty. It makes it feel more like a stealth level, and does not encourage the player to engage with everything the mod has to offer, so I did not like that. Another thing I don't really appreciate is the lack of aerial combatants in the mod. There are some places where drones are used a lot, but more drones would just be appreciated in some levels where the skies feel particularly empty. It's just, that could ramp up the difficulty in a new way that isn't way too many empties. Occasionally in the mod, then you'll run into shotgun attacks that will one-shot you. It's not something I like. It feels like just a bit too much in my opinion. Very occasionally, then there are some mild performance issues. I've only heard of performance issues because, I don't know, my PC can handle it, but I have heard reports from other people about frame rate drops and lag during some specific fights, Cell 240 especially. But yeah, that fight and a few others may give you some performance issues, but I didn't experience it, so if you have a PC that's well in the range of running AC6, then this shouldn't be an issue for you, but I think it's still a fair warning to give anyway before you play. There are some examples of fights that just have way too much visual clutter, again, Cell 240, and sometimes the Enforcer, but overall, while I do have a few other problems with the mod, then I think those go into my personal peeve category rather than any kind of legitimate criticism. So, you know what that means if you saw the last video. That's going to bring us to... So yeah, first off, the boss coloration feels very repetitive, especially on chapter bosses. You can sort of wave your finger and guess what the boss coloration is gonna be. Let's see, Balteus HE, oh yep, black and red. The Enforcer, black and red. Cell 240 Apollyon, black and red. It feels very repetitive, and I feel like it could use some more creative color thing, like maybe a blood red Cell 240, or maybe the Enforcer could have a bit more colors on it. But honestly, I don't think this is like an objective issue. I just think that the coloring on the modified bosses feels repetitive, and it could use a bit more variety. I think the tuning of the game feels a bit awkward on lightweight versus heavyweight setups. It's very much of a, if you're fighting a boss, you're going to use a lightweight. If you're fighting enemies, then you're going to use a heavyweight, which makes it a little bit jarring for levels like Depth 2, where you're switching between them, as well as climbing the wall. But still, I've heard some people say, oh, the mod is tuned against heavyweights, and you can't play a heavyweight. I think they're wrong. I've played through the entire campaign as a heavyweight and didn't experience that many troubles. Scratch a few bosses. A few bosses did give me a lot of trouble as heavyweights, but again, it's a difficulty mod. What did you expect? So yeah, I do not think that's really much of a problem. The column numbers given by some specific enemies on the missions where you're paid to kill more enemies, yeah, I don't need to say anything there. It's a little bit buggy, makes really weird grinding levels, but yeah, if you know, you know, but it's not that noticeable, to be honest, so I wouldn't call it an objective criticism. So, what are my overall thoughts on the mod? Well, let's go on to... I love this mod. Where Armory is a standout and an achievement in terms of what it does for the player, RUBICON'S Inferno is just like that except for the campaign. Except, unlike Armory, I think Inferno gives you exactly what you want, which is a new challenging experience, an actual difficulty mod with amazing bosses and an amazing story. Of course, it does give you a bit more than what you asked for in terms of some mild plot changes and NPC replacements, but still, I would not recommend it for people who are looking for new gameplay but aren't looking for difficulty, because this is definitely a difficulty mod. It's not for people who like restarting or getting stuck on things a lot. It's also not for people who are expecting like an expanded player arsenal to even the scale. This isn't like a power fantasy mod, even though some parts are hack and slash, but this mod is amazing. I actually struggled to find a lot of the problems here, which is why the segments weren't as long as I could have liked. But yeah, overall, I'd say this mod is like a 8 or... Actually, no, it's a 9 out of 10 for me. I think this is a 9 out of 10 mod. The problems are fairly easy to overlook, but still, yeah, very fun mod. Very fun mod, and honestly my favorite AC6 mod, so yeah. absolutely would recommend, and that's all for today. Oh, and please like and subscribe and the other stuff. I could use the dopamine. So yeah, very much appreciate it, and expect more reviews in the future.